My name is Carol Whitaker. I'm 72 years old, a retired elementary school librarian, and until a year ago I lived in the home my husband, Ray, and I bought the week after our wedding in 1974. A modest two-bedroom ranch in Oak Hill, Kentucky, with blue shutters, a garden that could make the cover of Southern Living, and more memories than I could count, let alone carry in a moving truck, and I never thought I'd leave it except in a pine box. As Ray used to joke, back when jokes still came. Easy, before the cancer took him 7 years ago, and even though I'd gotten used to sleeping alone and pouring coffee for one, the house had never felt like a burden until my hips started failing me and the stairs down to the laundry became little cliffs I dreaded. So when my knees locked up on me in the middle of hanging Ray's old shirts on the clothesline last fall, and I had to crawl back inside, panting like a dog in July heat, I finally started thinking maybe it was time to let go, too. Find someplace smaller, simpler. Maybe even one of those retirement apartments with the bingo nights and the panic buttons. Just the thought of leaving our garden made my throat tighten. But that's when I met Lacey Duvall, this tall, honey-voiced real estate agent who showed up at our church one Sunday, smiling and handing out those glossy flyers that said, "Seniors deserve to downsize with dignity." And after the sermon she found me by the donut table and said she recognized me from the church directory and had been meaning to talk to me because she'd seen my home listed in a vintage property survey and thought it could sell for 6 figures above market if I worked with her firm, Duvall Senior Living Consultants. And before I could even finish my jelly donut, she was offering a free consultation, no strings attached, just a little advice from someone who respects folks like you. And Lord help me, I was lonely and flattered and more than a little tired of arguing with my own body. So I said yes, come by next week. And when she did, wearing a cream blazer and flats like my daughter used to wear to work, she walked through the house like it was a museum she already owned, pointing out charm elements and curb appeal, but also tapping the baseboards with her pen and sighing about costly deferred maintenance and outdated electrical. And then she looked me right in the eyes and said she had a buyer, cash ready, a couple from Nashville looking to retire early, who would pay a premium if I signed a short-term option agreement that let them lock in interest, while I found a new place, which she'd help me do on the house. And though I didn't understand half of it, I remembered Ray always said, if you don't understand a contract, don't sign it. But then again, he also never had to crawl up the stairs like a baby just to change into pajamas, and Lacey made it all sound so easy, so secure, and she promised I could stay in the house through the summer. No pressure. So I signed, thinking it was just step one, thinking I could still back out, thinking no harm could come from trusting a woman who called me Miss Carol and hugged me like family. But within weeks, strange men started showing up on my lawn with tape measures and cameras. And when I called Lacey, she brushed it off as standard inspections. Then in early June, I got a letter from the county courthouse saying the deed had transferred to an LLC named Visselbrook Estates, and that my occupancy extension expired in 30 days. And I just about dropped my sweet tea on the porch when I read it, because I hadn't sold anything, hadn't moved out, hadn't been paid a dime, and when I called Lacey, she didn't answer. And when I drove to her office downtown, all I found was an empty storefront with a for lease sign and a dusty flyer in the window with her face on it, smiling like none of this had happened. And that's when I realized she'd taken my home, my trust, and vanished into thin air. I didn't sleep a wink that night, not a single blessed minute, just sat on the edge of the bed Ray built with his own hands, the one I was suddenly being told I didn't even own anymore. Holding that court letter in my lap like it was a bomb and replaying every word Lacey had ever said, every warm smile and soft touch on my shoulder, every lie that had sounded like kindness. And when the sun finally crawled up over the azaleas out front, I made myself a pot of coffee strong enough to melt a spoon, and started calling anyone who might know what to do. First my daughter Liz, who lives up in Cincinnati and has 3 teenagers and a husband who works too much. And though she tried to hide the panic in her voice, I could hear it when she asked what, exactly, I'd signed. And I had to admit I didn't really know. I just trusted Lacey, trusted that the paperwork was what she said it was, that it wasn't a full sale, just a temporary agreement. And Liz told me to fax everything I had to her friend, Allison, a real estate attorney. And while I was digging through the folder Lacey had left, the one with all the fake charm and faux gold lettering, I found the signature page. The same one I'd scribbled my name on without reading the rest because Lacey said she had another appointment and promised we'd go over the fine print next time. And that page, it turned out, was a legal document that sold my house for 1/10 of what it was worth. with a clause saying I'd agreed to vacate in 60 days. Pending minor repairs, and worse yet, it was notarized by some man I'd never met, and the signature didn't even match mine exactly, which made me wonder if Lacey had doctored the rest after I signed the one page. Allison said it smelled like fraud, but proving that could be tricky, especially since the LLC that bought the house was registered in Nevada, a state notorious for anonymous shell companies, and the buyer address led to a mailbox in a strip mall. So while she looked into it, I went down to the police station with a folder under my arm and a heart pounding like a snare drum, and the officer behind the glass barely glanced at my papers before telling me it was a civil matter, not criminal. And maybe I should talk to the Better Business Bureau or an elder advocacy center, like I'd just come in to complain about cold soup and not the fact that someone had stolen my home right out from under me, and that was the first time I cried. Not because I was scared, though I was, and not because I missed Ray, though I did, with a hollowness I couldn't name, but because I felt stupid, because I, Carol Whitaker, who used to read contracts aloud to help the school secretary with budget forms, had been tricked by lipstick and buzzwords and empty hugs, and the shame of it wrapped around my ribs like a vice, made me feel older than my years, made me want to hide, but I didn't, because something in me, something stubborn and southern and probably a little reckless, lit up that night. And I started calling everyone I knew, from the garden club to the women's circle at church, and it turned out I wasn't alone. 3 other widows in the area said they'd talked to Lacey Duval too, though none had signed anything, thank God. But they all remembered how persuasive she was, how she'd show up with cookies and talk about legacy planning and stress-free transitions. And when I mentioned the name Thistlebrook Estates, one of them gasped and said that's who had bought up half the block over on Lantern Drive and bulldozed every home within a month to make way for condos that never got built, just left the land raw and barren with orange fencing around it. And suddenly it hit me. This wasn't just about me, it was bigger, a pattern. A scam with a script and a target. And Lacey wasn't working alone. And when I told Allison all of that, she asked if I'd be willing to talk to a journalist she knew, a woman named Shelby Trahan who had done exposés on elder fraud before. And even though the thought of being on camera made my skin crawl, I said yes, because if talking meant someone else didn't fall into the same trap, then it was worth every tremble in my voice. So Shelby came to the house, and I made coffee while she recorded my story. And before she left, she asked if I had anything personal Lacey had touched, mugs, pens, anything for possible fingerprints. And I remembered the notepad she'd left on the kitchen table with her initials in cursive, and that's when things took a turn, because Shelby knew a private investigator who used to work financial crimes. And when he ran Lacey's photo through his network, he found 6 different aliases she'd used in the last 10 years, each with a fake license and a long trail of elderly victims, from Georgia to Illinois to Arizona, and most of the time, she vanished before charges could be filed, slipping into a new name, a new hair color, and starting over, and I'll admit, that chilled me to the bone, made me feel like I was chasing a ghost, but the difference now was, I wasn't alone anymore, and with Shelby's article gaining traction, other victims started reaching out too, and soon there were enough of us to form a coalition, to push the state attorney's office to open a broader investigation. And meanwhile, I was still living in my own house, even if legally it belonged to a company that never showed up in person, just sent letters with threats and deadlines. And with Allison's help, we filed an injunction to pause any eviction proceedings while the fraud case unfolded, and the judge, God bless him, granted it on the basis of potential elder coercion and deed manipulation, which meant I had more time, but not peace, not yet. And every time I went to bed, I half expected someone to come knocking with a moving truck and a court order, but I stayed anyway, because if I gave up that easily, then Lacey, or whatever her real name was, would win. And I couldn't let that happen, not to me, and not to the next woman she tried to charm. The morning Shelby's article ran on the front page of the Kentucky Sentinel, with my name and porch swing, and the headline, "She sold her house and didn't know it." My phone rang nonstop, friends, neighbors, even old students I hadn't heard from in years calling to say they'd seen it, some crying, others furious, all saying the same thing. How could this happen? And by that afternoon, the mayor's office had issued a statement promising a full review of elder-targeted real estate transactions. And a news van parked outside my house like it was a crime scene, which, in a way, it was. But the best call came from the state attorney's office, where a woman named Janelle Timmons told me they'd located Lacey, real name Danielle Sharp, living under a fake identity in a Nashville condo bought with funds from a different LLC tied to yet another shell company, and with the mounting testimonies from women like me across 3 states, they finally had enough to arrest her for fraud, elder abuse, and wire transfers across state lines. And though I didn't get my house back right away, the LLC dissolved during the investigation, and since no one else stepped forward to claim ownership, the judge ruled I could stay pending a quiet title suit, which Allison took on pro bono. And even if I never get the deed cleaned up completely, the land is mine in spirit and in memory, and I planted a new rose bush next to Ray's old birdbath just to prove I'm not going anywhere. Since then, I've spoken at free senior centers, passed out flyers at libraries, even helped a local bank design a fraud prevention seminar for retirees, and every time I meet someone who looks nervous, ashamed, like they've made a mistake they'll never live down, I hold their hand and tell them what I learned the hard way. Trust is not a weakness, but silence is. So speak up, speak loud, and never let a smile talk you out of asking hard questions, because con artists come dressed like kindness, and what they're really selling is heartbreak.